I live alone in a little house in a big city. Kind of a rough around the edges neighborhood, but I've lived in the area most of my life, and my block is tight-knit in spite of half of it being vacant or abandoned. It's also a city that, like many others, tragically has a lot of folks living out of cars and RVs, trying to eke out an existence. So I shouldn't have been too surprised when, back in October last year, I got a text from a neighbor. You might want to take a look out your back window. About 10 feet away was an enormous 40-foot motorhome in the dead-end alley, sitting right on the edge of the small cliff that is my unfenced backyard. Having lived in urban areas my whole life, I'm no stranger to odd things happening immediately outside my window, but this did feel a little bit more intrusive than living in a ground floor apartment. No thanks to my back window being my bathroom window. It sat there for a few weeks without anyone paying much mind. A few neighbors speculated it might have been someone working on a couple demolition and construction projects in the neighborhood. A supervisor from out of town, perhaps. Whoever it was, I didn't really mind as long as there wasn't any mess, though I was slightly worried a wrong move would end with someone or the whole vehicle rolling off the retaining wall and potentially crashing through my wall. Of course, there was the small fact that half the block now couldn't access the alley. My city is very particular about removing vehicles if someone is potentially living in them, and after a few roundabout calls to the parking department, I and my neighbors were told that we needed some evidence they were a hazard or abandoned. So I grabbed a cheap webcam off Amazon and popped it in my window and then went on with my life. About a week later, after some friends over for dinner had left, I thought I'd check and see if the camera had picked up anything. I didn't sleep for the next few nights. Like clockwork, every night around midnight, the lights in the RV would flick on in the otherwise pitch black night. A couple of cars would pull up behind and the occupants would unload several very full garbage bags into the RV. Then these shadowy figures would creep down the yard of the vacant house next door, into mine, and methodically circle my house, shining flashlights in each window. Cars would come and go all night until about 5 a.m. Then all was business as usual during daylight hours. It's worth mentioning that my house is essentially a studio apartment on top of a garage, built into a slope. My bed is about 10 feet from those windows. Also worth mentioning, my neighborhood had an alarming rash of about 20 armed home invasions the summer before, or the arson on an occupied house across the street a few months earlier. Vulnerable was an understatement of how I felt. I ended up moving most of my furniture around my bed as a makeshift barricade. I called 911. They were a bit incredulous. Nothing was actively happening as I called. This wasn't an emergency. I can call the non-emergency line in the morning if I want to speak to an officer or detective. The next morning, I felt it was prudent to bring any yard tools that would make a tempting window breaker and double-check the back porch and security flood had working bulbs. In just my luck, I managed to completely break both fixtures in the process. Almost immediately as I walked out my back door, the RV's door swung open, and a man and woman stepped out. They were dressed in t-shirts and shorts, despite the 39-degree weather, and looked a bit like zombies. I waved. They didn't. They stared past me. I quickly retreated back inside to keep an eye remotely, but not before noticing something even more startling. The RV had about 6 security cameras mounted on it, 3 of which were trained on my back door. I was watching them, they were watching me. After a day or two more of this, I had become fully nocturnal, leaving all the lights blazing all night, and I started to feel like I was losing my mind. This was both mostly benign and deeply unsettling. Texting friends and family in hopes of reassurance. Well, didn't do much. They're probably just trying to find a quiet place away from the encampments. Maybe they work a night shift. If you were living on the streets, wouldn't you want a security camera? I mean, you have one on your house. Okay, maybe I was being paranoid. My neighbors were mostly preoccupied with the alley being blocked and subsequent missed deliveries. And it's not like the city was going to do much anyways. The cars kept coming and going all night. The people with flashlights stayed just outside the edge of my yard, but I would catch the occasional flash through the window. After being reluctant to leave the house, and my cat alone, I had to leave for an in-person work meeting. While I was gone, my camera pinged me about activity. The RV folks had set up stakes around my property and were wrapping yellow caution tape around my yard and across the alley, and had set up a barricade of traffic cones around their vehicle. This was just getting weird. By this point, a few of us on the block started a group text to keep tabs on things. One neighbor a few houses down caught the female half of this duo in her backyard with a chainsaw, climbing their oak tree in broad daylight. They confronted her and she gave the same treatment as me. A mute 1,000-yard stare. That neighbor called it in and I watched a few officers poke around for a minute, clearly puzzled by the barricades and tape. I thought there might be some imminent resolution. They then booked it back to their squad and took off with the lights and sirens. There was a shooting a few blocks over. I assumed they got called too. Another night goes by, punctuated by the RV's alarm going off every couple of hours and the engine revving menacingly, though nothing out of the ordinary. At least this ordinary. I take my mid-morning nap I've become accustomed to over the past week, only to be woken by the loud angry yelling. I pull up the camera feed. Out back is another neighbor, the goofy dad, cum ex-naval officer, venting his frustrations to a police officer, who's banging the RV door with a baton, demanding the occupants come out. There's a brand new sports car parked behind, one that I'd barely make out on my cheap camera's night vision. I carefully left out the front so as not to be conspicuous, and circled up to the mouth of the alley to speak with the officer and explained my story in a near stream of consciousness ramble. Did you see them leave? Nope. I played back the camera. The sports car showed up around 5:30 a.m. and nobody had left since. He said the car was too new to have a current registration and the RV was registered to a deceased person 4 counties away. Suspicious, but nothing outright criminal, but he'd ticket them with a 24-hour tow notice. As he was typing up the ticket, the sports car came barreling down the alley in reverse, nearly plowing into the cruiser, and I was told very sternly to leave immediately. I ran home and pulled up a police scanner feed to try and glean some information. They were calling for a gang officer, a domestic violence unit, the Vice Squad, and CSI. So my gut feeling wasn't too far off the mark. Later that night, the officer called me asking to send the entirety of my footage. I asked if there was anything he could divulge about what happened. I can't tell you much, but this was a bad dude and he's going away. We towed the car as evidence, but we'll have to wait until morning to get a big enough truck to move the RV. To say I slept well that night was an understatement, but that calm was shattered quite literally early the next morning as I heard glass breaking outside. 3 masked men were breaking into the RV with crowbars. One was up on a ladder, sawing through the roof with an angle grinder. I frantically called 911, struggling to explain the context of what was going on. Once again met with a verbal eye roll from the call taker. Is it your RV? No. Sir, you can't report a stolen vehicle that isn't yours. I hung up and tried again, hoping to get someone else on the other end. We have a wrecker dispatched to that location. Are you sure these aren't the new tow operators? Sure enough, just as these guys managed to get the RV started, the tow truck was coming around the corner. They booked it so fast, it ripped up the gravel, and it's a miracle it didn't end up through someone's wall. Well, whatever. The absolute freaking heck happened is seemingly over. Seemingly. Again, seemingly. I suppose this is an epilogue of sorts and by far the most unsettling part of this story. I quickly upgraded my crappy camera to a couple commercial grade ones with smart object detection, synchronized floodlights and automatic sirens, hoping I would rest easy. No, it was going off all of the time, at least once or twice a week for over a month. The cameras caught creeps stalking around my backyard and windows with flashlights. There were also plenty of other times cars were idling with the lights off in the alley for unsettlingly long periods. The one I can't shake was the guy at 3 a.m. slowly making his way up the alley in a low crouch, taking a long pause directly behind my house, and then booking it towards my door full speed. Or the guy that managed to get past the camera, and I came face to face with his ugly mug pressed up against my kitchen window around midnight. At least the alarms did their job. Every one of these guys took off once lit up like a stadium with sirens blaring. For some comic relief, that last guy tried to hop a retaining wall and face planted on the other side. Of course, again, friends and family had some not so reassuring platitudes. Maybe it was somebody looking for a lost dog, or somebody got lost in the alley, or maybe this just always happened before I had lights and cameras. And shaking what little hope I had in law enforcement, the cops, if they showed up at all, were at least an hour late. But here's the real kicker. I filed a public request for the arrest and case report and got it back months later. Turns out my neighbor in the RV had kidnapped his ex-girlfriend and was likely trafficking her. She'd in fact called 911 but didn't know the neighborhood, and the cops were looking for them in a different part of town. He had a lengthy rap sheet for felony burglary, fraud, and firearms charges. An acquaintance of his was interviewed by detectives and said the RV was packed to the gills with guns and improvised weapons, and this guy told this witness that he would come back and kill whoever sent him back to jail. And right at the bottom, in all caps, was my name and address, but phone number redacted, listed as reporting party and complainant. The cops searched the sports car and found nothing of note. The RV, as you recall, was apparently stolen before they could even get a valid warrant. The ex fled during the arrest, as I saw on camera, and was never heard from again. The DA dropped the case and this guy was released from jail 48 hours later. It's been about 6 months since my last visitor at night. There hasn't been a whole lot of peace of mind before I turn in for the night. It's slowly fading, but I can't say I'm not a little on edge after dark, even in my own home. My house is now completely lit up 360 degrees. I put various dents or spiky plantings around my windows and the perimeter, and I sleep with a rifle next to my bed. But fortunately, new folks have moved into the vacant houses on either side of me, and they also seem like good people. I just don't know if I have the heart to tell them all what went down. "19 female. The first day I attended class, Alex asked me out. Alex was over 300 pounds, and shallow as it may be, I was completely uninterested in him and turned him down as politely as possible. This was not acceptable to Alex, who believed all women 20 years of age or older were either taken or defective, and he required a 19-year-old girlfriend to avoid forever aloneness. Alex made friends with my awful roommate Dirk, who he hated, purely in order to see me every day. He constantly asked me out, and every time I turned him down, I felt disgusted with myself. I was shooting down an otherwise perfectly sweet kid based on what I thought was solely a physical trait. Now, I know that I was probably also picking up on the fact that Alex was not coloring with a full box of crayons. Between familiarity with his presence and my own conviction that I was at risk of becoming a terrible human being, I finally accepted a date. He tanked the date. I mean full on. He would not say a word to me for 3.5 hours until we missed the actual date itself, ending in me walking out. The next day, he was back at my apartment begging for a second chance, but I turned him down again. I told him his behavior said he wasn't as interested as he claimed. Alex set about proving me wrong. Every day, there he was. "How's your day? What's your favorite memory? Tell me something about yourself." I should have identified this as creepy, but I still thought he was just Dirk's friend, and most of the time, Dirk was snorting aerosolized cheese and generally being a terrible conversationalist. Alex was actually gathering information. From me, from Dirk and my friends, from my teachers. Why? To construct a whole new persona to appeal to me. I knew nothing about him until the day I knew everything about him. Everything was a lie, and those lies sounded amazing. The second date went fantastically, and we began dating exclusively. This drove Dirk into violent lunacy. Alex's web of lies. We were dating 3 weeks when Dirk tried to cut my brake line. Alex, of course, offered to let me live with him. He had a great job and was paying for a whole apartment by himself, he claimed. I could finish paying off my half of the lease with my roommate and just help Alex with utilities until I had more money. I gratefully moved in and quickly began uncovering Alex's lies. Some were truly asinine. Like when I discovered that the stuffed pasta and sauce he'd spent all day making from scratch for me were actually Bertolli. That was especially weird because Alex was a fantastic chef and could have actually cooked something from scratch to impress me. Some were not so stupid, like the way he did it in fact have a job. Alex's parents were paying for everything and they hadn't been intending to. They'd made a deal with him. They would pay for college until he graduated. For the first year-long lease, they would pay for half of his rent, but he was to immediately get a roommate or a job, and once the lease was up, he would be responsible for his own room and board. Yes, they were rich. As I moved in, he called them to brag. Their reaction was not what he expected. "So you got a roommate? I guess we'll only be helping you with half the rent then." He came clean about his job, claiming he thought I'd think less of him if I knew his parents were paying the bills. He told me they had some unexpected financial troubles and I needed to pick up half the rent. I was now paying for half my former roommate's rent and half of Alex's, but I just thought it was some bad luck, not his fault. Then of course my lease with Alex was up, and when we renewed, his parents unexpectedly cut him off and I was paying for everything. More bad luck, he assured me. I wouldn't find out about his deal with his parents for years. Alex stalks other women. He met a girl named Amy online in a role-playing game we played together. From the moment he met her, he refused to game with me. Soon, he was refusing to speak to me. I couldn't even take him out to a movie. He needed to be home at his computer, and he needed all of his attention free in case Amy spoke to him. If she wasn't logged in, he was frantically e-stalking her, saving all the information off her social media sites and grilling her friends for more details. Soon, he only reacted to me to negatively compare me to Amy. "Meatloaf? Amy made her boyfriend steak today," or "Amy would look better in that bathing suit than you," or "Amy just dyed her hair. You never dye your hair." He refused to admit that he had feelings for Amy, so I asked to meet her in-game, hoping that my presence would temper the situation a little bit. He fought me over it, but I insisted that if she was, as he claimed, just a friend, he shouldn't care if I met her. "Fine," he said, "but you need to play along." With what, you may be asking yourself. With the fact that he told her that he was a straight woman and I was his roommate. Also, that he was a lawyer, and that I was in law school, and that he was on and off dating a med student, and that we had a dog. The list kept going. I asked him why he told this woman so many lies. Why? Because in his research of her, he determined that this persona would make her trust him the most. And you need a lot of trust to have in-game hot lesbian sex apparently, with someone who is definitely not secretly a dude. I looked at this new character and saw a skinny little buxom lingerie-clad woman. I was tired of him ignoring me. He could still play the game, but he had to get back on his dude character and play it with me. He whined but switched tunes. However, through the entire quest, he was silently tapping away, refusing to speak to me. Then Amy showed up. "What the heck is this?" I demand. "I needed someone to talk to," he cried. Alexandra?" Amy asked. "Why are you on a boy character?" "Oh, because my roommate was so sick of being hit on by horny dudes, she asked me to escort her around for a while," he replied. I rage quit. The next day after I returned from work, both our accounts had been cancelled and our games uninstalled. He never mentioned Amy again. I never saw another stalking play out to that degree, but there would be many times he'd completely check out and refuse to leave his desk, compare me to strange women, randomly cancel game subscriptions, and exhibit other suspicious behavior. The one true human rears his fat head. Alex, despite his foibles, skated just shy of being worth breaking up with for 2 years. I think he was really trying to suppress his entitled behavior out of fear of loneliness, but he eventually began to revert. He'd always been jealous of my time, but soon he began actively alienating me from my friends. He would try to convince me that they were bad influences or go behind my back to start fights between us. He would physically bar me from seeing them by suddenly needing the car, feigning an illness or scheduling a date at the same time, and asking me who was more important to me. Soon, I lost all actual perspective on the state of the relationship, pared down to nothing but people who insisted that Alex was the best thing for me. He began to feel entitled to me and my support and gradually stopped putting any effort into the relationship. Despite my lack of perspective, I wasn't completely blind and began to question what was happening. He convinced me that the degeneration of our relationship was my fault, that I was the one not treating him as he deserved, and that he was beginning to doubt I loved him anymore at all. I asked him what I could do, and he responded with a veritable laundry list of demands. He needed me to buy him the new video games as they came out, take him out on more dates, lose more weight, wear padded bras and save for a boob job, wear nothing but designer suits or sexy costumes, sleep in lingerie, become bisexual, and treat him to threesomes. Alex was a big fan of lists of crazy things. The more demands I refused, the more hostile and bitter he became. His soulmate would do these things for him. Therefore, I wasn't his soulmate. But now we were 21 and all the decent women were taken. And it was my fault that I had cheated him out of his soulmate. She was with someone else now, and he was stuck with me. The only option he saw was bullying me into becoming his perfect mate. Thus began years of gaslighting, lectures, and withholding affection, while he and all of his friends convinced me I couldn't live without him. One day, Alex announced that our faltering relationship would be fixed if we moved so he could attend a trendy school where he would finally earn his degree. I asked if his parents were alright with paying for this much more expensive school, but he assured me that they had spoken and were very supportive. And by that, he meant that 4 years ago, they agreed to pay for the associate's degree he still hadn't earned. So we moved. I transferred jobs and he enrolled in this new school. Then he told his parents for the first time and asked for $15,000. They cut him off. The breakup. Alex took out a bunch of loans and went to school anyway, where he met Madeline, and promptly became obsessed with her. This was a problem because his previous fixations were all women on the internet he didn't have access to. Now the only thing standing between him and sweet, sweet sextings with the object of his obsession was that she didn't want to be another woman. And that was of course also my fault. His bitterness toward me became overwhelming. Everything started a fight, down to flipping light switches and seeing people in hats. I told him that I really couldn't handle all the fighting, and if we didn't do something about it, the relationship wouldn't survive. He immediately blurted out that we were breaking up, and it was my fault for bringing up such a serious topic when relationships were supposed to be fun. He ran off to Madeline's apartment before I could get a word in. When I tried to move out, he said that if I left and stopped paying the lease, he would default on rent and ruin my credit, so I just moved to the couch and waited out the lease. I would habitually wake up to him licking me. Leave me alone. No. We should do it right now. No. You want it. I can tell you want it by the way you're moving. You're just saying no. The way I was moving was otherwise known as laying on the couch breathing, but going entirely stiff. Now you're just faking it. That doesn't count. You still want it. He insisted, slurping his tongue across my face. Seductively, apparently. I generally just had to wake up and leave for work early to avoid a tongue bath. He was really bad at kissing. Why aren't we doing it? He demanded one day. I told him, confused, that it was because we broke up. He said that I owed it to him. See, because I'd been nice to him during our relationship, I'd led him to believe that I would continue doing it with him if we broke up. I'd also lead him to believe that he was desirable and would be drowning in poon if only he were single. If he'd somehow known that he was 350 pounds or that running out on me might hinder his access to me naked, he never would have broken up with me. It was my fault. He hadn't had sex since he left me. The lease was almost up and Alex was suddenly interested in patching things up. He told me that although his soulmate was out there somewhere, she'd been taken while I was dating him, so he was willing to settle for me. That didn't work. He told me that he had misjudged how much he would miss sex and gifts. That didn't work either. He gave me a giant sunflower and apologized. I faltered. 1. This wasn't a lame monotone apology claiming that whatever he did, he would try not to do that anymore. He actually itemized all the things he'd done that had hurt me, demonstrated that he understood why I'd been hurt by his actions, and admitted he's done them for selfish reasons. 2. Giant sunflowers are magical and they make me feel like a tiny sparkly pixie. I said I would consider taking him back if he admitted to all the lies he told me over the last 5 years. This is when I learned pretty much all of the information here. The deal he made with his parents, the fact that he completely made up his past to attract me, and other major lies. He promised to change and be the boyfriend I deserved. Idiotically, I took him back. He made a huge gesture to get our relationship back on track, so I did too. I put him back on the lease and immediately found out I'd been played. He reverted back, claiming that he'd made an effort to be my perfect boyfriend, but I hadn't tried to be his perfect girlfriend. Because why wasn't I bisexual yet? Why hadn't I gotten a boob job? And why wasn't he having a threesome right now? If I wasn't going to make an effort, neither was he. He went right back to picking fights about people and hats and demanding I fulfill his insane list of desires. I was pretty much emotionally busted at this point. Alex was just going to trick and lie to me to get whatever he wanted, and I was stuck with him forever. Maybe that's what I deserved. At about that time, my old friend Vincent contacted me, saying he'd be in town and asking me if I wanted to hang out. I asked Alex if I could, and he replied that of course I could see my friends. It wasn't like he was controlling or anything. Alex obviously began slandering Vincent and making it difficult to see him, but I managed to make it anyway. While I was hanging out with Vincent and his friends, Alex began blowing up my phone. He'd been so upset by my absence that he ate so much that he got sick, drank too much, and gave himself a bad perm. You read that. He reduced me to tears on the phone, demanding an apology for every stupid, self-destructive thing he'd done. When Alex finally hung up on me, I apologized to Vincent for ruining the get-together. He just said, "You don't have to be sorry." I just kind of blinked at him, went home, and broke up with Alex. I've been married to Vincent for 5 years. Hello everyone, this happened last winter. If this story is misplaced, I'll move it, but I think it will fit this subreddit. So I'll start by giving you a little bit of background. I am, like most girls here, a really short, skinny girl. I attend school in a pretty well-off neighborhood, but it's really on the border zone. So you have the middle-high class on one side of the avenue and the extremely poor people on the other. A few other friends and I usually wait for the bus on the poor side of the avenue, and I think I should mention that the bus stop is right after the intersection of another avenue, so the red light lasts for a good minute. Luckily, this time I was with Anne. Now, we were waiting and chatting for a bit, and we saw this dude coming. He looked like he was high, and he was sweating even though it was a really cold winter day. He had dirt on his knees and elbows and a glassy look in his eyes. He stops walking and asks me what the time is. I check and told him it's 1:45, as politely as I could. I've been taught that if you can avoid conflict, it's better to do so in the most polite way possible so that you don't upset people. He stops and stares at me for a good 30 seconds and tells me that I have a beautiful set of eyes. I have hazel eyes, and people usually compliment them. I usually grow really awkward at compliments on my eyes because I have trichotillomania, and in consequence have no eyelashes, so I turn my back and try to make conversation with my friend. He walks right up to her and also greets her with a kiss on the cheek and says something about her piercing blue eyes. Then he breaks off into a weird speech. Look, girls, I am simply looking for something that belongs to me. At this point, I thought he was going to rob us, but it turned out to be something creepy. A girl with beautiful light-colored eyes that belongs to me. And I was thinking that maybe you two could come with me, or I could join you wherever you are going. While we were at it, where are you going? We were actually going back to her place to revise for an exam. Now, I look at her quickly but intensely and answer while looking at her. We're going shopping. She got my not-so-subtle hint and agreed. He then said that he would take us shopping. I checked to see if the bus was about to arrive, and it was. until the damn red light brought it to a halt. Shit. My friend looks when she sees me look away, and he says something really chilling. You know, it's going to be a long time until that bus arrives. And he puts one of his arms around my waist. Now, I couldn't be polite anymore. I pulled away from him. I honestly thought it would be harder, but he apparently didn't see it coming, and onto the avenue and dragged Anne with me, all the while looking at the creep to check if he would try anything. The creep smiled right at us and kept talking about how beautiful our eyes were, how he just wanted to be with one of us, or if he was lucky, both, and similar stuff. Then the bus started coming towards us, and we immediately got in. The creep did not follow us, and Anne scolded me for talking to a strange-looking stranger. I worked in a porn store from 2002 to 2006. It was a small, somewhat poorly run and locally owned. There were two in town, both closed down now, that were owned by the same people. I worked at both of them, depending on where they needed me. It was an easy job. I was in college for the majority of the time I worked there. I pretty much got paid to sit around, watch TV, play around on the internet, do my homework, and occasionally ring up a customer. We were never busy, and we always worked alone. Aside from the creeps and the one time I got robbed, it was a good time. I could have my friends come and hang out with me, as long as they weren't behind the counter. After I met my then boyfriend / now husband, he also got hired, and so we would just hang out with each other at the shop if we didn't have other obligations. The store was set up so that when customers walked in, they were in the main room with the counter, which also had novelty items: lube, toys, cards, books. If they went to the room on their right, they would be in the movie room. The room on their left had lingerie, stripper clothes, and shoes. Both rooms had cameras to prevent shoplifting. For this particular incident, I was alone in the store. A clearly Amish man walked in with another guy. The other guy hung around in the doorway for a bit and then walked back outside. The Amish guy was probably in his 50s, very short, stocky, and had graying hair. He identified himself as part of the Amish community and said that the other guy was his driver. He then said something to me about not telling the other guy what he was buying if he came back in. I just laughed it off and tried to busy myself with something else. I tried to have as little communication with customers as possible unless they were non-creepy regulars, because I didn't want to give off even a hint of interest. He then went into the movie room for a bit. He came back empty-handed and came up to the counter. He asked if we had lemon lime flavored Spanish fly. I told him that we did not have that flavor, but we did have some Spanish fly. He told me that the Amish girls really liked lemon lime flavored stuff, so he uses that in their drinks. Then he told me that it works really well. At this point, I'm giving all the signals of disinterest in hopes that he will shut up and move on. But he didn't. He continued stating that he thinks it's really funny when he gets all these women pregnant and their husbands think that it's their child. I have no idea how he would know if he was really the father of those children or not, and I certainly didn't ask. Then he propositioned me for sex. "You are a pretty young girl. Would you like to make $500? I declined. "Well, do you have any friends that would like to make $500? "No, sorry." "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm good." His focus then returned to the lemon lime Spanish fly. He told me he was desperate for it. I was desperate myself to get him out of the store. I told him that maybe they had some at our other store across town. Luckily, the trick worked and he left without incident. And thankfully, I never saw him again. Many years ago, when we were young and stupid and full of idealistic optimism and newly married and working shitty mall jobs, my husband and I had a friend in need. He was my husband's co-worker, Jack. Jack was about 8 years older than us and was in the middle of a messy breakup with not one boyfriend, but two. A sort of package deal. They all lived together. He was being kicked out and he needed somewhere to move in a hurry. Our lease was up soon and he offered to pay half the rent if we upgraded to a 2-bedroom and let him move in with us. It seemed like a sensible enough plan. We liked Jack and felt sorry for him. In addition to his relationship ending badly, he had been through a lot in his life. There was the kind of standard stuff, like growing up in a homophobic environment, having to join the army to get an education, and dealing with DADT, and the fact that he was working a shitty mall job and pushing 30. But there were also other tragedies in his past, and we felt protective of him. He had been addicted to drugs and had gone through recovery 10 years before after dropping out of art school. He had been in an abusive relationship with the guy who had shot at him. He had depression and took an array of prescriptions and had very shaky self-esteem. But there was one tragedy that towered over all of that. When he was in high school before he came out, he had a girlfriend, Steffi, who he had truly loved, his very best friend, and Steffi had gotten pregnant. But near her due date, she was in a terrible car crash and was rushed to the hospital. They were able to save the baby, but not her. Jack had raised his daughter Melissa the best he could. He joined the army to support her and get better employment prospects. Unfortunately, that meant he had to sign custody over when he was deployed. He signed it over to Steffi's parents. When he returned, they went to court and used the fact that he was gay against him and kept custody. Now, he had to pay hundreds in child support to them every month and only saw his daughter, who was at the time going on 10 or 11 years old, twice per year. Periodically, he would get a picture of her and show it off at work. She literally looked just like him, except female, of course, and she would write him letters about how much she missed him. It was just so sad and unjust. But tragic past aside, Jack was fun to hang out with, and I was looking forward to sharing space with him. We liked to do the usual stupid 20-something mall worker stuff, mostly revolving around drinking and going out and buying stuff we didn't need, and watching too much TV. He was a great conversationalist, a great listener, and even liked to cook. We were going to have a blast. We moved into the new place and everything was going well. It was awesome having to pay so much less in rent, and basically having a constant social hour at home. At first. The first problem came only a few weeks in. Jack never came home one weekend, even though he was supposed to meet us to go somewhere. When he finally called, he was crying. He had been so despondent about his breakup and everything. He said he had relapsed for the first time in 10 years and used cocaine. He assured us it would never happen again. He already felt terrible about it. I didn't know any technical details about drug addiction, but this unsettled me. Yet I figured that if it was really a one-time thing, he could pull himself together again. And for a few months, everything was back to normal and seemed fine. We even went on camping trips, out to the clubs, worked on art projects together, and went shopping for clothes and accessories. It was basically the stereotypical gay man and straight woman BFF dream come true, and everybody was happy and content. But he started disappearing on a regular basis after that, eventually missing not just social appointments, but his work shifts too. I suspected, obviously, that drugs were the problem, but had no clue what to do about it. I started pressing him a little bit to get him to tell me what was up, and he just said he was going through it. Steffi's parents had successfully gotten an order to increase his child support payments, and he was feeling pinched and despondent about his daughter. I was understanding of this, of course. He had pictures of Melissa all over his room. It was clear that this was a huge deal to him. One weekend, he was acting especially upset and went missing completely. He missed work and wasn't answering his phone. I called hospitals and so forth looking for him, after trying the usual friends and hangouts. Eventually, we went out looking for him. It had been 3 days without a trace. We were afraid that something bad happened. Finally, he stumbled back in, and here's what happened. He had been at Starbucks and some guy had started slinging gay slurs and they got into a fight. Jack had spent the weekend in jail. Not long after this incident, Jack went off to visit his daughter for one of the 2 times that he got to see her that year. They were meeting in San Francisco, which seemed odd, as she lived in the Midwest. Well, whatever, it was vacation season. While he was away, I got an email from a man I didn't know asking me if Jack was going to bring Tina with him, down to SF. What the heck? I had no clue who this man was or who Tina was. Some of you know, I am sure. I sure as heck know now, and how the heck did this guy get my email address? Of course, I started investigating, trying to figure out what was going on. And it didn't take me long to find out that Tina is a slang term for crystal methamphetamine. I was of course suspicious, given Jack's past, and then something started nagging at me. Questions I had about this situation with his daughter. Little subtle things that didn't seem quite right. Since Jack was out of the apartment for a good couple of weeks, I did something I know no one endorses doing. I snooped through his desk. I knew something wasn't adding up, and I had to know if he was telling the truth about this distant daughter. I looked through his desk, and I found his old high school yearbooks. I found out Steffi's last name, and I started combing through public records, newspaper obits, social security death records, and the white pages. Steffi, Jack's dead girlfriend, alive in rural Indiana. Absolutely the same person, verified with birth dates and photos. So what about the daughter? Maybe she was still real. After all, there were all those photos and she looked so much like Jack, but it didn't take much longer before I discovered the truth about that too. Melissa wasn't his daughter. She was his niece. His brother's kids, but I had seen him writing checks for child support. What the heck? And the rest came down like dominoes. He had never been in the army, he never went to art school, and didn't even go to San Francisco to visit his quote-unquote daughter, but a look through his IM log confirmed, run some drugs and party. Pretty much nothing he told us had been true. It was all one big tragic lie, told very convincingly by a sympathetic character named Jack, and he was coming back in just a day to live under our roof and do who knows what kind of drugs and tell more lies. What should we do? We were trying to figure out how and when to confront him, and possibly kick him out when he returned. We tried to just act normal, and since Jack had such a disarming personality, it was pretty easy to just dissociate what we knew and enjoy joking around with him like usual. We were still trying to figure out how to deal with this situation when Jack had a new crisis come up. He had gone to the clinic and tested positive for HIV. Nightmare come true. Of course, we were there for him as he dealt with this. Held his hand, listened to him talk, gave all the support we could. Though I admit it was in the back of my mind at the time. I wonder if this is really true or if this is another lie to get sympathy. Of course, you can never ask for proof of something like that. And, of course, you can never kick out a friend when he was dealing with such a life-changing blow, so we decided to just sit on what we knew and let him adjust and cope, and then maybe find some trumped-up excuse to move out on our own later in the year. Just quietly slip away. I did tell him I had gotten the weird email though, and asked him directly if he was using meth. Of course he said no. He kept talking about his daughter and started agonizing about how he was going to tell her that her dad had HIV, and how if he died, he could at least be left with Steffi. Oh, biting my tongue was so hard, but it would have been just too cruel not to. Then things started getting even weirder. Jack started coming on to me. Yeah, supposedly he was the gayest gay who ever gayed, and of course I was married. Not only that, but to his supposed best friend. I didn't take it as seriously as an affront, accordingly figuring he was being jokey or ironic at first, but it started to ramp up and it was even more confusing than anything so far. Other weird things started happening. He started wearing really weird outfits, like a hippie skirt. He didn't usually cross-dress, and a fur coat and a fedora. He would go out in public like this. He didn't seem psychotic, and he said it was his form of gender expression. Okay. Our kitchenware and dish towels started disappearing. Completely disappearing. He spent a lot of time in his room and then went out to the woods to think. When he would come back from the woods, sometimes he would be normal, but other times he would be all emotional and would have some story to tell about a weird thing that happened to him. The weirdest was when he came back from the woods with blood on his clothes and shoes, his hair matted, smelling like blood and still cigarettes. He said he had gone to visit friends, a couple who he met through an HIV plus support group, and who had also been dealing with depression. When he got to their house, the lights were off and something was wrong. He broke in the side door and found them both very gorily dead. He called the police and then took off to the forest to have a nervous breakdown. He told this story in chilling detail, talking about stepping in splattered brains and washing it off in a creek while smoking a full pack of cigarettes. But the weirdest part of that episode was how he tried to tell us that they had deeded the house to him so we could all move in as soon as the biohazard crews cleaned it up. What the heck? In the middle of all of this, he lost his job and we had to shoulder more of the expenses. There was no question that he was on drugs now. Obviously, his behavior had really deteriorated. Normally, you would just go to court and evict a roommate with all of this going on, but again, he had been a friend and supposedly just been diagnosed with an expensive, life-threatening disease, and yada yada yada. It would have looked really bad to kick him out. And what if he was telling the truth about having HIV? Then we would be heartless. Plus, the legality was super complicated because he was on the lease. We were stuck in a little bit frantic, and every time we would start to get a plan together, he would throw some other weirdness our way. He went to the pound and got a dog. Since he was off thinking, doing drugs, all the time, I took care of her most of the time. Sometimes he would get all mad and insist on taking her with him though, which I hated because when he came back days later, she seemed hungry and sad because he didn't take proper care of her. Man, it would take another post to tell all the weird stuff that happened in this last chapter. At some point, he got religion and started reading books by Rick Warren. No shit. He tried to get me to watch weird porn with him, and he kept obsessing about my boobs, and we caught him listening through the door to catch us having sex. But mostly, he was gone all the time. His room hermetically sealed with weird smells coming out of it. And we were quietly terrified and exploring our legal options to get him the heck out. We had to sneak around to figure this out. He had started obsessively listening in on us in our room, so we would park our car at the far end of the parking lot and sit out there with the music cranked to talk and try to figure out our next move. Whenever we asked him about drugs, he denied it and started to get touchy about being asked. He had an answer for everything and a new story of woe or terror every week. And while we basically assumed he was lying about everything at that point, it was always stuff that it was too touchy to call out or impossible to prove. Thus, we started to feel like we were going a little bit crazy, because we couldn't tell up from down anymore. At some point, I gingerly approached Jack about the daughter issue. He didn't try to refute my allegation that he had lied about his girlfriend dying and his niece being his daughter. He didn't apologize or explain or say anything else. He actually fell asleep. Then in the middle of the day in the living room, the dish towels started reappearing. On the floor in the living room was something sticky. Well, I guess it could have been super glue. Finally, the weird smell was bad enough that we had to find out what it was. He might not just be smoking. He might actually be cooking meth in there, right? And, of all the terrible stuff, that would have to be the last straw that would justify kicking him out, even though he was struggling with disease and depression and mental illness. So, while Jack was out reading Rick Warren with some friends one weekend, my husband and I put on surgical masks, leather boots, and gloves and went into his room. The gear was because once we cracked the door open, we could see that it was piled 3 feet deep with debris, rotting food, sex toys, and other extremely disgusting things. Using ski poles to clear a path, we investigated. It looked like a psychotic, sexually deviant hamster had been in there. Clothes were piled on the floor, then peed on. Boxes and papers had been torn to shreds. This is apparently a meth head thing. Porn was strewn everywhere. There was what we recognized as his usual going out bag, thrown in the middle of the bear-stained mattress, its contents spilling out into the bed. Lube, a Rick Warren book, and the biggest dildo anyone has ever seen. My spouse skied on over to check out the bathroom, and I went to Jack's computer desk. In the bathroom, our missing kitchenware seemed to have been appropriated to make a mini meth lab with some random household products. There was a little scale too, and some white powder, if there was any remaining doubt. The dish towels were in there too, covered in about 5 different body fluids. The toilet area, well, it lives on in legend. He didn't appear to stand or sit or aim. It looked more like he was just propelling stuff at the wall. But at the desk, I found something even more horrifying. An open IM window explaining in no uncertain terms where Jack had gone that night. Not only had Jack been cooking and selling meth, not only had he been earning money through prostitution, we had suspected as much, he had been prostituting out his dog. The desk was covered in note cards with instructions, leaving no doubt about exactly what was going on. We just went and started packing our stuff, as fast as we could. I called my parents and they agreed we could stay with them until further notice. We started driving over carloads of stuff, careful not to be caught by Jack, who no doubt would be pissed because how could a lying drug addict with no job afford to live on his own? He was gone a lot, but he would come back at unpredictable moments, and now he was angry and paranoid and on edge a lot of the time. He claimed the police were stalking him. Was he paranoid or was he about to get busted? We were scared to call the cops ourselves because what if they thought we were in on the drug stuff? How could we prove we were not? It was nerve-wracking. Finally, we confronted Jack and told him that he had to get all the drug paraphernalia out of the apartment. We were not going to go down for his crime. He was furious and stormed out and drove away with tires squealing. We took that as our cue to gather up as much as we could and get the heck out for good. Fortunately, he left the dog, so we were going to take her to save her. It was 3 a.m. and we were just about to leave for the last time when we heard his tires squeal into the parking lot again. He slammed into the curb, slammed his door, and started stomping up the stairs. We laid down flat on the floor in our room, hoping he wouldn't realize we were there. He came into the apartment, angry, declaring he was going to mess us up and that he was going to kill someone. He was destroying everything loudly. I was really afraid we were going to die, and my brief life literally flashed before my eyes. As his footsteps approached, I was curled around the dog, and suddenly he was standing there. Give me the dog, she's mine. She is legally mine, hand her over. I held onto the dog motionless, then he yanked her up and I couldn't hold on. He stormed back out and squealed away. We finished packing and drove out to my parents. We stayed there for about a month, then settled the tab at the old place and moved into a new apartment, far from the old neighborhood. We got a bunch of creepy calls and scary emails from Jack for a while. Worse, we saw him around in unlikely places, and he showed up at my parents' once, but didn't get out of his car or come to the door. I think I saw him once at the new apartment, but couldn't be sure because it was dark. We were definitely on edge for a long time. Once he had been gone long enough, the landlord swamped out the apartment and threw out of all of his stuff and sent him a bill. He messaged me 2 years later and claimed he had gotten clean and sober. He wanted to know our new address so he could send us some stuff, but I evaded. I still don't know if he really had HIV or what really happened when he came home covered in blood, or what the story was about with the niece, or even what happened to the poor dog. Seriously, I know no one endorses snooping. I get it. I know. You don't have to tell me. There were a lot of things I would have done then that I would not do now. But in the long run, I have to be glad that I snooped and found out what was going on, because it was becoming way too crazy. Hey, first time poster here. Not quite as harrowing as some of the stuff on here, but it's messed with my head quite a bit. So I'll set the scene first, I guess. I'm a dude and I was 15 at the time, going to a shady school in Manchester. It's not the greatest city. And at lunch, my friends and I would go to this office in the school, where the teachers would leave us be as long as we didn't trash the place. Somehow over the years, we had managed to make it pretty exclusive, getting teachers to remove the jerks, if you will. But certain people, like new starters or foreign kids sometimes, were always allowed in. There was this ginger Polish girl called Maya that started there and had been getting some crap, as I'm sure you could imagine. A new ginger Polish girl in a UK school. She was an easy target for nasty little kids. Now let me get this straight. I'm not mentioning this to build a kind of sympathy for her. I'm only mentioning it because I think this may have been a catalyst of sorts. Either way, one lunch, she was sitting at the computer next to where we used to play cards. She looked kind of down. While we were playing, she was pouting like when someone's trying to signal you to ask them if they're alright, you know? So I asked if she was alright, and she said the kids were being horrible, calling her ugly and stuff. This is where it started. Okay, so when a girl says she's being called ugly, what as a bloke is the first thing you say? For any guy, almost the first thing out of your mouth is, you're well fit. She was 2 years below me, so I was pretty sure it would fall upon deaf ears. For the next month or so, I can't honestly say I never noticed her at all. I'm not even sure when she started following me, but I can remember exactly when I noticed. Apparently, she used to get the same bus home as me. Well, it was 2 buses, and I never even knew she was there. Not at school, not on the bus. Let's say she was socially invisible. The only reason I noticed is when I was walking into my driveway and my bag strap snapped, so I turned around to pick up my stuff and I noticed that she was walking by just staring. At first, I thought nothing of it. I mean, I'm not the best looking guy. I'm tall and skinny. We call it lanky in the UK, so the idea of being followed never even once crossed my mind, but I had noticed her and from then on, she was everywhere. At first, I'm not going to lie, it gave me a big confidence boost to have a stalker per se. But oh boy, let me tell you that wore off really quick. At first, I didn't say anything to anyone. I mean, she's only 13 and she poses no threat to me physically. What was there to worry about, huh? But until it happens to you, you won't understand the sense of tension you get when you're around that person until it happens to you. Okay, so a quick detour before the comments is set ablaze with crazy stuff. No, I was not interested in her, and regardless of gender, being stalked is always horrible. Every day I would get the bus back and she would be there. Well, I guess she was always there, but it was not the same. She was always watching, and when I look over at her, she'd quickly look away. She always got off at the same street as me, so I thought she lived close by. So one day I acted as I normally do, walking down my drive, slyly keeping an eye on her to walk past, and then followed her. She only started getting off at my stop after I had made that single comment. Well, at least to my knowledge, as I said, she kind of just disappeared into the background. I followed her mainly to know where my enemy was. I was legit walking around for about 45 minutes, pretty much exactly back up the bus route towards school, and watched her walk into her house. This is when I first had that real dirty feeling you get, as I realized she walked almost an extra hour a day every day just to watch me walk into my house. She stayed on the bus to creep on me. I mean, this chick was everywhere. She was on me like white on rice. Outside of school wasn't so bad because I could just ditch her. But after a few months of the conjoined twin treatment, she started to get brave and chatty with my friends, who all thought this was hilarious, by the way, and were always taking the piss. I didn't for a second entertain this and was quite frankly getting mad at my mates for putting me in this situation again and again. You know what it's like being forced to interact with someone who is following you. Oh, but that wasn't just it. We'll get to that. So the months go by. My mates are taking the piss, and the longer she stalks, the more she learns about my hangouts, and such is appearing a lot more. Now, at this moment, a few things were happening at the same time. I'll try describing it to the best of my ability, so bear with me. But my friend thought it would be a good idea to try to start to get with this girl, as she was always chatting to them to get close. I can't say for sure, but I'm almost certain that he was hooking up with her, which just made this all the more messed up. A new Polish girl had also started in school, and she was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. After a few weeks, I plucked up the courage to ask her out, and to my surprise, she said yes. Sweet. This would be short-lived though, because I had no idea at the time Carolina was actually good friends with Maya. And as soon as Maya found out, she went around the school telling everyone who would listen, and of course Carolina blamed me for telling everyone and cut that short. I have no idea what was running through Maya's head when she found out, but her little plan had worked and had pushed me to breaking point. I had to deal with this. I thought this was getting better as the focus had seemed to be off me while she was with my friend. What a jerk he is, by the way. But apparently not. I ended up caving and inviting her into my house so I could get to the bottom of this, which in hindsight might not have been a good idea. So I invited her around while everyone was out. Now, I can't remember the entire conversation, but she knew where all the rooms were and what they looked like. I remember the chills as she told me about my house. I eventually asked her why she had ruined my very short relationship with Carolina, and she scowled horribly at the name and just replied, "You're mine and you always will be." I lost my shit, yelling at her, threatening to kick her in the head if she didn't leave me alone, but she seemed to enjoy me shaking and shouting at her. Now, at this point, she'd been following me and stuff for about a year and a half. I didn't have long left in school, but she knew where I lived and my hangouts. She had even managed to get real close to one of my friends. The straw that broke the camel's back was that she had been coming around when I wasn't there, getting really friendly with my mom. My mom's bipolar and manic depressive. Some days she can barely get out of bed. Never mind out of the house. I have no idea why this was never mentioned, but she eventually told my mom she was my girlfriend, and she was sorry for lying to my mom. Well, my mom freaking freaked out. She was only 14 at this time, and I was about to turn 17, so my mom went off the deep end. I think the verbal beatdown my mom gave her is what made her stop, but man, did I really get it drilled into me that night. After trying to explain that she had been stalking me for almost the last 2 years, trying to get close, I found out that Maya had been coming around for months and told my mom we just happened to go to the same school to get friendly. I don't know why the yelling my mom had given her made her stop stalking me. My mom is pretty nasty when she gets going, but I only had a few weeks left in school, and she wasn't following me. I tried to think what could have been if she had sunk her claws any deeper into my life. I know this isn't as terrifying as I'd like to be honest, but reading all of these made me remember that feeling of dread in this situation. I'm sorry for this long post too. I didn't realize how long this would take to explain. I'll begin by giving a little bit of background. At this time, I was a 16-year-old female, working at a chain coffee place while in high school. I am in college now. I'm 19, 7 hours away from said place. This happened at a time in my life in which I was super shy and had a tough time standing up for myself. In retrospect, I could have handled it a lot better. I used to work closing shifts with my best friend after school, so it would be like from 3 to 10 p.m. or 5 to 10 p.m. We worked at a relatively dead store, so we spent most of our time playing music and talking. We did our duties, of course, like taking out the trash and restocking. Although both of us always dreaded taking the trash out as we had to go out back. The dumpsters were behind the store in a dimly lit area next to a sketchy liquor store. One night a man came in. It wasn't unusual to have customers come near closing. It was just uncommon to see anyone we didn't already know. Our store was mostly just regulars. He was lanky and probably around 30. I mostly remember his eyes. They were piercing, the type that never breaks a stare. I remember initially thinking he was attractive. Yikes. The way he spoke was short and concise, just ordering a small hot latte. I made his order and that was it. I told my friend about how I thought he was attractive, and then we started referring to him as the small hot latte guy. We always called people by their drink orders. He came a bunch of times after that, each time staying a little bit longer and longer, talking a little bit more and more. One day he came with a woman, probably his girlfriend. I remember I felt a little bit weird, like she was staring at me or like they had spoken about me beforehand. She glanced over at him and said, "Wow, she's pretty." I didn't think much of it and said thank you. Served them, and I thought that would be the end of it. He then began showing up and talking to me a lot without her. He started off as being friendly. I honestly don't even know what we talk about. I think music. Then he got kind of flirty. Initially I was flattered, but being underage and immature, I didn't even think about the fact that it was kind of alarming. He began to stay for a while. Sometimes he would bring a laptop or a notebook. I could feel him staring at me and listening to our conversations. But at that point, I wasn't getting creepy vibes from him, as my coworker and I had dealt with our fair share of creeps. He then somehow got my number. To this day, I honestly don't know how. He texted me and somehow, I still wasn't creeped out. We would talk about music a lot, and then I began to learn more about him. He was in his late 30s and had prior problems with substance abuse that he never really got into. He went back to school for art and would show me his pieces. He'd also send me a lot of pictures of nature. I thought they were nice. Looking back, they were actually pretty creepy. For example, a picture of his backyard sent at like 3 a.m. He would stay and work on his art as well. He then told me he barely enjoyed hot lattes, that he just wanted to come and see me. He would come in and give me gifts even. This was the point I finally started realizing that I did not like this situation. He started by just giving little snacks or drinks. I would accept but would never eat or drink them. It wasn't that I necessarily thought he had ill intentions, I just had a hard time accepting gifts. I remember one night he brought me a book about one of his favorite artists. I reluctantly took it but had tried to decline before. I remember telling him about one of my favorite musicians and sending him a link to a performance I really liked. Then he started getting sexual while talking non-stop about the song. He began talking super aggressively and I would laugh it off and decline when he would ask to send pictures. I began talking less and less and told my friends about the situation. She agreed that it was getting creepy and said I should maybe change my schedule. I told her I'd be fine because I'm stubborn. He'd still come in every week at closing time and he'd even stay in his car till we closed. Meaning, he would watch me go to the back to take the trash out. I began making excuses as to why I couldn't talk and began going to the back of the store when I would see him. He then sent me a bunch of texts about how great I looked while working. I didn't respond, but he kept texting and I told him I didn't want to talk anymore. He sent a bunch of messages describing me how much I meant to him and how he wouldn't be alright. I started freaking out and I blocked his number. Still, I returned to work. I honestly thought that he would stop coming by. I was wrong. I felt uneasy the whole shift. My friend said that if he came by, he would just go to the back and wait it out. I saw his car coming and my heart sank. I was on the verge of tears and hurried to the back. I could hear them talking but couldn't decipher what exactly was being said. Then about 10 minutes later she came to the back. I could visibly see that she was upset. We ended up both just crying and hugging each other. Not the first time we've done that. She told me he kept asking to see me and asking how I was, and she just kept refusing. She told him how I was underage and how he made me feel uncomfortable. He wouldn't give up. Eventually she threatened him and he left. We were both shaken up, but I thought it was over. It was time to take out the trash and lock up, and we both felt okay. I was opening the door while juggling like 3 bags of trash and saw something on the ground. I was confused at first, but then realized what I saw. It was flowers and a note. I never felt so sick to my stomach and looked around the parking lot. I didn't see his car. I threw them out immediately and told my friend I didn't want to read the note. She read it and told me I had to. It was something to the effect of, "I've never felt so connected to someone. You are breaking my heart. Please don't do this. I'm sorry." Looking back, I honestly didn't lead him on, but initially, I just felt as if I was in the wrong. Nonetheless, we turned the corner to take the trash out and both hoped that the parking lot was empty. It wasn't. Let's just say the trash was not going to get taken out that night. I continued working there and still worked there on my breaks from college. I had different hours after that, and in the summer I was going to leave for my freshman year, and I saw him again. It was around 3 p.m. It was busy, we made eye contact, and he left. That was the last time I saw him. Looking back, I was so naive and could have handled the situation so much better. I am forever thankful to my friends. Over 20 years ago, I dropped out of school and moved to the Midwest to live with my boyfriend at the time. His name was Tom and I barely knew him, but he had only just turned 20 and was feeling disenchanted with his life. I was in college but had no direction and no idea what I wanted to do, and had just had a falling out with my best friends, leaving me with no real friends either. Then I met this guy who lived halfway across the country. He was everything I had wanted as a new adult. Charming and sweet, and everyone loved him. Now in my mid-30s, I recognize a lot of things he was doing as narcissistic behavior. He love-bombed me from the start, convinced me that I would be happier if I just left my whole life, and wanted to isolate me from my family and few remaining friends. And I left him. My family didn't take it lightly and tried their hardest to convince me not to go. But after they met him, they eased up. Like I said, he was a charmer. They ultimately resigned themselves to the fact that I was a legal adult and could do what I wanted in the long run, and they didn't want to risk not having a relationship with me at all, so they backed off a bit and wished me well. Almost as soon as I had moved, his attitude changed completely. He would get mad at nothing and make me leave the room if he was in it and didn't feel like talking. And eventually it progressed into him calling me stupid every chance he got and threatening to kick me out of the house almost every month. I always knew when it was coming to. He had a cycle. He also convinced me that I had nowhere else to go since I had no family close by and all of my friends were his friends first. I was trapped. I eventually fell into a pretty deep depression and just resigned myself to my new fate. His behavior only got worse. He started to berate me in front of other people. On one occasion, I asked him for a cigarette when we were hanging out with some friends. He took one out of the pack and threw it across the room and said, "Bitches smoke last," and started laughing. No one else laughed, but no one else did anything either. He punched me in the stomach one day in front of his grandma, who just said, "Oh, Tom, stop that," and he laughed it off like it was nothing. He treated me like this day in and day out for almost 4 years. During the last year that I was there, he would lock me out of my bedroom and I would hear him talking to other girls. I found messages on his MySpace account. Yeah, this was a long time ago. Of him talking to other women and telling them he was going to break up with me and date them instead. One girl in particular, April, also tried to talk to me and befriend me. I didn't know the extent of their relationship and just thought she was trying to be nice to me. At the time, I had no idea the nature of their relationship, but thought it was odd they were being so chatty online. My birthday is on New Year's Day, so on New Year's Eve, the last year that I lived there, I wanted to go out with some friends. All of my friends were also his friends and we knew them all very well, so I didn't think it was weird to go out with him. I should mention that he hardly ever left the house and didn't have a cell phone and would never come to the house phone if I called. All the girls he talked to were done online in messaging apps. I asked him if he wanted to go, but he said no like I knew he would. So I went. And I had fun for the first time in what seemed like forever. My friend, who was a dude, drank too much and couldn't drive me home, so we both slept at his sister's house. We slept completely separately and had no feelings for each other at all, and nothing did or ever would have happened. I didn't think twice about staying and didn't bother calling the house to let Tom know that I wasn't coming home because, like I've made clear, he mostly didn't want me around and wouldn't have come to the phone anyways. The next morning when I got home, I turned the corner to walk down the hallway in our shotgun-shaped house. He was walking towards me with a horrible look on his face, and I knew I was in trouble. He shoved me as hard as he could into the wall. I went into the bedroom and he followed. He started yelling at me, calling me all kinds of names, and saying that he expected better of me. I sat down on the edge of the bed and he stood over me still yelling. Then all of a sudden he punched me right in the face. Just hard enough to shock me but not leave a black eye. Something came over me at that point and I stood up and told him, "Don't ever touch me again," and walked out. Over the course of the next few days, I packed up what little of my stuff I could gather and told him I was going to stay at my sister's back in California for a while. He thought I was coming back, but I never did. I sent his grandma money to pack my stuff and ship it to me, and I never saw him again. But that doesn't mean the story is over. Fast forward a few months, and I see online that he's dating April, the girl from MySpace. I laughed a little at it since she was still trying to be my friend, even though I had never met her and she had been talking to my ex while I was still with him. I wrote her off as a nutcase and didn't think much of it. That is, until one night I got 30 text messages from an unknown number. It wasn't unknown for long since she identified herself almost immediately. She was saying the world's worst things to me. I had been casually mentioning to online friends that she was a weirdo, and that they probably deserved each other, since it struck me as weird that she was so two-faced about being nice to me, while she was sending my boyfriend at the time nude photos. She had apparently been alerted to my comments. She wasn't at all happy about it. Among the text messages were threats of coming out to California to kill me, and warning me that she fights dirty. She had gotten my number out of his phone one night and was going ballistic. I told her to stop or I would call the police, and that only shut her up for the one night. Every single day I would hear from her. I began dating somebody new and she would add him on every social media platform and try to talk to him. She did that with everyone I showed interest in publicly online. She made fake profiles to stalk me on social media and call me horrible names. When I finally went public with what my ex had done to me and how he had treated me, she lost it even more. It took me about a year after I left Tom to tell anyone what he did to me. When I finally did, most people were sympathetic and offered words of comfort. But April, she sent me a 4-page long email that was filled with delusions. She wrote about how she and I were good friends and how she wished that we could still be, and how she tried to be my friends no matter what. She wrote that I was lying about my abuse and that I didn't have battered woman syndrome. And that she knew that for a fact because she majored in psychology in community college. Seriously. She wrote that she had met all of my Midwest friends and they all hated me and laughed about how stupid I was. She wrote that she thought I was a closeted lesbian and that I need therapy. Also saying that she was in contact with a lawyer and they were working on a harassment case against me. Of course, none of this was true. I shut my laptop after reading that letter in total shock. Not only did I have to deal with being treated like garbage for 4 whole years, but now I was dealing with gaslighting from my abusive ex's new girlfriend. What the heck? I responded to her, which I shouldn't have, and told her that I thought she needed professional help and to stop contacting me. Then I wrote to my ex's email that I remembered and told him to tell her to leave me alone. I never heard back from him, but I stopped hearing from April for a while. About a year after that, she started up again. She made new social media profiles and would post the same things I did immediately after I posted about them. She bought clothes that looked like mine, wore her hair the same way. I work in the art industry and all of a sudden, she started posting about how art is life. I play guitar, so she posted about how she wants to play guitar. I started a cooking blog and even guest blogged for a few websites, and she made posts about how her dad was a chef, so naturally cooking was in her blood. If you're wondering how I knew about what she was posting, it's because she always made herself known. She would like or unlike my photos on Instagram. She would comment on profiles she knew I interacted with. A few times, she would message me with weird nonsense like, "Stop stalking me," when I had literally never spoken to her. Also, yes, people can have similar interests, but 1 or 2 things are a coincidence. Having every interest in common with someone is not, and she couldn't just be into the same things as me. If I had a hobby or an interest, she was not only into the same things, but she was the best at it and it came naturally to her. And she was not only good at it, but so good that people paid her to do it. I once made the mistake of telling a girl online who I didn't really know about April, saying something in passing like, "That girl is crazy." This girl immediately told April what I said, and I started receiving hate mail from people I never heard of before. Friends of April's came out in droves as she posted Instagram stories about how I was stalking her and I was threatening her. Her best friend contacted me on Instagram and told me I was crazy and that what I was doing was a crime, that I should expect to hear from a lawyer with a cease and desist order. I told her that if she needed my lawyer's information, I could forward that to her since I knew that there was no way I was ever in danger of legal action. About 3 months later, that same best friend sent me an email that she had gotten from a blog I ran at the time. She apologized for what she said to me, said that her friend was clearly disturbed and she had no idea and was sorry for invalidating my trauma that I had experienced with my ex. This last event was maybe 4 years ago. I don't hear much from April anymore, but that's not to say I don't hear from her at all. She still posts on Twitter about how I abused her, and how I'm still lying about my experiences with Tom. Please remember that I have never ever met this person, and have only ever had conversations with her in passing when she would message me over a decade ago on MySpace. Not only did I have to endure 4 years of abuse at the hands of my ex-boyfriend Tom, but I have to deal with over 10 years of hate messages and harassment from a clearly unhinged woman who has fixated on me for some reason. I've heard from people that they are no longer together, but that hasn't stopped her for good, it seems. I still hear from her every once in a while. I write all of this to say, if you have experienced trauma or abuse, you are not alone. And that even if certain people don't believe you and call you a liar, I believe you. No matter who you are or my personal feelings about you, if you have been abused or assaulted, I believe you. There was never any reason to call someone a liar publicly for years. So, to April. I hope that he never hurt you and that you are doing okay. I hope you get the help that you need and that you're safe and comfortable. But please, let's never meet. This was many years ago, maybe when I was 20 or 21. I was assaulted when out jogging in a park while on vacation somewhere north in Ontario. It was deep in the woods. I was listening to music alone. I should have been more careful. There was this guy with a blue dirt bike at the entrance to the trail who was acting really creepy and suspicious. He kept trying to start conversations with me as I was unpacking my stuff and getting ready. Kept asking about things like, "Where did you come from?" or "You work out?" When I was changing my shoes, he asked me for my shoe size and I immediately thought he was a creep. I just lightly chatted with him and kept my gaze down. I was wearing a hat so it would hopefully hide my face. Nearly half an hour of jogging and sightseeing, I saw the blue bike ahead. It was parked off to the side and I remember the feeling like a lump in my stomach suddenly formed and I thought for sure that guy was probably ahead to try something. I was on the main path for the whole way since, but considering he was waiting there, I decided to backtrack a little and take the nearest side path to avoid the encounter. 5 minutes into the side path, there was this narrow spot in the trees that led onto an old concrete square. I think it was like a water reservoir or a foundation or something. I wasn't thinking and just kept going. I stepped in this black adhesive stuff on the other side of a lip of concrete. My shoes were completely stuck. It was like some kind of tar or glue. I don't know. I didn't know what it was and just assumed it was something from the structure, like leftover construction stuff. I spent a couple of minutes just trying to work my shoes out, but eventually had to take them off for better leverage. Then I saw the man. He came towards me. I felt panicked. I was going to get my bear spray when he said he was here to help. I didn't want to potentially aggravate him or do something that could get me in trouble, so I stood back and let him try to get my shoes out. I noticed that he was just pretending that he couldn't get them out, and I remembered what he said about my shoe size and thought something was so off, so I backed away and considered spraying him. It happened fast. He turned around and slapped my foot with the black stuff. I stumbled trying to get back. I missed the spray and he was wrestling it out of my hand. I tried to knee him in the groin. He released me and ran off. I got my sock off and was going to run, but he just had more of the stuff. He had some metal bucket of the black stuff, and he was slapping handfuls of it on my feet. Couldn't kick him and it was difficult to move. I was screaming and hitting him as best as I could. Sorry if this is too much detail, but he was telling me to shut up and even used it on my mouth. He pushed me to the ground, took my backpack and just continued sticking the stuff to me. My body was frozen in fear. I heard a buzzing sound and I knew what it was without seeing it. I began struggling to get up or kick him or do anything. My clothes were pinned and my arms too. I'm not going to give details, but yeah. He then started using a vibrator on me. I was crying, stretching it as far as I could. If I got an arm almost out, he would add more. I rarely ever masturbated at the time, so suffice to say it was overstimulation. He didn't undress me apart from my pack and socks and didn't use his you-know-what anywhere, so I'm at least grateful for that. He just kept buzzing me and fondling my body with stuff, asking things like, "Do you like it?" or "Does it feel good?" It was probably around an hour of that and he was recording it. I just let him do whatever until I found a way out or someone came. Then he brought up his towel to my nose. It was fuming with some chemical. I was thrashing and trying to scream. Somebody heard, I guess, and shouted. I don't remember much. Time was all fuzzy. It felt like I was falling on a roller coaster. When I got my thoughts back together, it was getting dark and I was alone. I spent a long time getting out, ripping my clothes and scraping the stuff off my body where it was on my skin. I still don't know what it was, but Googling it suggested birdlime or construction adhesive. It was also apparently a type of fetish, so yeah. I walked back to my car. There was nobody there at night and I just drove back to my cabin and sat there in the bath. not even turning the water on, just sitting there thinking of what happened, trying to get as much off of me before I washed myself. My feet and other parts around my belly were stained black for a couple of weeks, and that night I just lay there silent. Even now, just touching stuff like soap brings back that time, and I can't help but feel weird by the slimy feeling of it. I'm wondering if anyone has ever had similar experiences or encounters with black adhesive. This happened a few years ago in Upper Ontario on a semi-official hiking trail. I really don't remember much of what happened during or after the assault, possibly because of whatever fumes I was exposed to. I remember driving very slowly because I was still feeling off balance. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have been driving, but there was no traffic that late. Some years ago, my family lived in a heavily wooded area in the Pacific Northwest. I was 5 at the time. My sister was 6. Our yard was fairly good sized, at the end of which was nothing but thick woods that ran back a long way. Our parents always told us to never wander off into the woods, but my sister and I were raised with adventurous spirits. That's why I always blamed this story on my folks. So one day we get the swell idea to go for a little hike in the woods on our own. We waited for our parents to both go inside, and off we went merrily tromping through the woods without a care in the world. About maybe 10 minutes in, we hear a rustling in the brush ahead, and we both stop dead in our tracks. We both looked at each other with sheer terror in our eyes as we saw a big bearded man approach with a red-stained axe in tow. His white wife-beater t-shirt was also splattered red. We had never seen this man before, and he was quite the sight. As a young child, it's hard to remember certain events, but this one has been stuck in my brain. He had a giant physique. The man asked us why we were out in the middle of the woods alone, but we were so frightened, all we could do was cry. He asked us if we wanted to come with him, and he would make us some hot cocoa. We were both shivering at the sight of this man, and at that moment, our parents could be heard yelling for us. Thankful for that, because if this man were any kind of good person, he wouldn't have looked startled and hurried away. After the dude walked away, we both booked it back home as fast as we could. After each of us received a whooping, we told our parents about the man, but my parents must have thought we were lying because they never saw anyone like that in the neighborhood or around our general area. To this day, I'm still not sure what the intentions of this guy were, but you would think he would have asked us where our folks were at, instead of inviting us to wherever for cocoa. I started creeping here a few months ago and fell in love. Originally I was sad I didn't have any stories to tell, and I kept racking my brain for any creepy memories, but couldn't think of any. Then this past week, a couple of small things accumulated to me, saying, damn, I actually think this is Let's Not Meet worthy, so I created this account to share. It's long though, sorry. I'll start by saying I'm a 21-year-old female. I just got a new job hostessing at a restaurant in the downtown area of the very large city I live in. Above the restaurant are pretty pricey lofts. On the first floor is where I work, along with the lobby, elevators, Chipotle, and a bakery, all of which have at least one door near the back of the store that leads to the lobby. When I got the job, I got access to the parking garage that the residents use. From there, I can take a back way to the lobby, which leads to one of the doors connected to my job. Every day I work, I pass a concierge working for the lofts. Occasionally, we speak to them. Like if one of the lobby's restrooms goes out of order, but other than that, it's pretty rare, which is why I thought it was odd when I saw Mike. He's the nightly concierge. Looks around, late 40s to early 50s, round glasses and short. He was around the bar scanning the area like he was looking for something. When he saw me, he came over and asked me for some extra promotion cards that we had been handing out to guests so he could give some to the residents. I simply asked my manager for some and gave it to Mike. That was it. At the end of my shift, Mike comes in and gives me 4 chocolate-covered strawberries, thanking me for my help. I'm used to everyone at this job and area being very polite and kind, so I accepted them with excitement and without a second thought. A couple of days later, I saw Mike again. I was packing a to-go order when he came up and said he had something for me. To follow him. At the concierge desk, he presented me with a bag that reminded me of old brown lunch bags, but was white and an envelope. Inside the bag was a cupcake, and inside the envelope were 2 miniature Hershey's chocolate bars. At this point, I was beginning to feel too much attention had been placed on myself. I needed to share, after all. Sharing is caring, right? I faked excitement, which I realized I shouldn't have. Thanked him and asked if he'd met the other new hostess, Michelle, who I was working with that night. He said no, so I introduced them. 10 minutes later, he brings a second cupcake. Too many sweets make me nauseous, so I ended up giving them to Michelle. He hands the cupcake to me, saying, "Stop by the desk on your way out. I have something for you." But the look on his face was creepy. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it reminded me of the way a child looks when they've given good news and they're waiting to be praised. Now, I'm starting to think, it better not be another damn cupcake. The night goes by slowly and Mike, yet again, comes in and searches for me. I'm at one of the computers putting in an order and he hands me 2 sheets of paper with some stuff typed on them. He says he's writing a book about the history of the loss. Okay, you're writing a book and you hand me barely a page and a half worth of text. Whatever. At the end of the night, I asked one of my best friends that I work with to stop by the desk with me because I didn't want to go alone. Turns out it's a 3rd cupcake, along with a Cosmopolitan magazine. Inside that is a printout of a joke that someone emailed him. The cover of the magazine is 78 Crazy Hot Sex Facts, which I tried to ignore. He had crossed out the name of the resident it was being mailed to. Read the magazine, I threw away the cupcake, and the joke wasn't funny. Finally, last night, I passed him as I was coming in. As soon as he sees me, his face lights up and I cringe inside. You see, this guy's nice and all, but too much is too much. He stops me and asks, "Hey, did you lose your purse?" "No, I didn't." "Well," and he pulls a small shopping bag out, and it's completely full. I didn't really want to look inside, so I kind of skimmed to the top. As I was pretending to be interested in the bag, he says, "You are the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, so," and trails off waiting for my reply. I acted like I didn't hear him and just thanked him with the fake smile, avoiding eye contact. "Do you want to look at it here, or?" I tell him no, I must clock in before I'm late. I am 30 minutes early. I power walk away, and as soon as I step inside the restaurant, I find Michelle and my manager and tell them what a nice surprise Mike gave me. They knew how creeped out I was by Mike, so they were 10 times more ecstatic than I was to see my little shopping bag. We take it to the back to inspect the items. Lots and lots of miniature feminine care products. Chapstick, wipes, perfume samples, a tampon, toothbrush, toothpaste, etc. And then the mother load. Small bottle of Astroglide natural lubricant. I do a laugh that is equivalent to, "Are you serious?" I feel violated for some reason. Really, really uncomfortable. I keep laughing though because I can't believe this old man just gave me a lube. Everyone is laughing fits too. Everyone else is having laughing fits too. Michelle, the bartender, my manager, and even some of the servers. Anyways, I don't look at the rest of the bag's contents. My manager offered to speak to Mike on my behalf to get him to stop, but I've never been the type to let other people do the talking for me. I'll do it the next time he tries to give me something. The night wears on and I'm on the phone taking an order to go, and Mike comes and drops off another cupcake. Yay. Gave it to Michelle again. She told me when she came in before me, he had asked her if she knew when I was coming in. Upon hearing my arrival was 2 hours away, he says, I have to wait a whole 2 hours before I get to see her." She said it didn't look like he was joking. Had to ask my manager to walk me to my car because I felt like Mike was going to follow me out there or pop out of the shadows or something. We did run into him after we left, but he didn't say more than goodnight, thankfully. After some deep gossip with a girl that's been working there for a couple of years, she enlightens me. She had come in to eat last night, so she was there and saw everything too. Mike was like this to another girl, the one whose shifts I took after she quit. She said he probably just grabbed all that stuff from gift bags from a party the banquet hall had earlier, not even paying attention to what was in them. But still inappropriate. And the book he was writing? Showed her the papers, and she said it's straight from a brochure the lofts give new residents about the history of the building. My general manager was thoroughly creeped out as well, and he's a creeper himself. He jokes like, "He gave you a bottle of lube? That's inappropriate. I'm going to have to confiscate that, okay?" He brought up a good point that I hadn't realized though. The cupcakes. They were homemade and nobody knew what he put in those. I could be eating semen while he sits at the bar, getting off on watching me / us eat it. I thought they were from the bakery next door. I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or not. I mean, the guy seems harmless, but I've only known him a grand total of 3 days. This is a story about my first trip to London and my first experience of the two. Our village guide group had taken around 19 girls down to London for the weekend to do the regular tourist hotspots and visit the Guiding World Center. Thrilling, I know. I was 14 at the time. I was more than excited to come to London and had received a lovely new coat for the occasion. We lived in rural Yorkshire, so it was quite a big to-do in our village. Believe it or not. We were packed off on the train and spent an unremarkable day and night in the capital city. Then came our tube trip. Unfortunately, the leaders had not planned for rush hour commuter traffic, and anyone can tell you the tube at peak times is a nightmare. It was certainly quite alarming to me, having genuinely never seen so many people crammed into such a tiny space, everybody pushing and rushing past us. We squashed into the corner of a carriage. I don't remember what line we were on. All I know is the 10-minute journey felt a lot longer for me. The carriage was completely packed, and everybody sandwiched into each other. As one of the older guides, I was on the outside of the group. The leaders had urged the younger guides ahead of them. This meant I was squished up against a friend of mine in front of me and a man I didn't know against my back. A few seconds into the journey, I noticed he is swaying against me, rocking and nudging me as the train moves. I push back, as no one else in the carriage seems to be having trouble keeping their balance like him. This doesn't stop him, however. The rocking motion intensifies, and suddenly I realize he is rubbing the bottom of my coat. I didn't turn around at this point, terrified of why this stranger appears to be rubbing my bum. I tried to push up further against my friend. Sadly for me, there is literally nowhere to go. I am stuck against this stranger. He's breathing very heavily at this point, and I bite the bullet and look behind me. I've never seen a you-know-what before, but now there is one being rammed into my lower back while a man masturbates into my new coat. This is the point I should have said something, screamed, shouted, or punched him in the cock maybe. But no. Stand there completely in shock for the rest of the journey while this pervert uses me as a wanking aid. Eventually it's our stop and we leave the train. I run ahead, crying at this point, pushing through the younger girls to get away from this man. I didn't look back at him, I just had to get out. Leaving the train, after it was obvious that I was crying, I refused to tell anyone why. My friend stopped me and I turned away. She laughed. "What's that on the back of your coat? It looks like someone spit on you." I threw that coat in the bin, there on the platform. I never told anyone what happened, and to this day, my mom still teases me about losing my brand new special coat. I would give anything to go back in time and knee that man in the balls so hard that his grandkids cried. So it's 7 a.m. and I'm idling in a McDonald's parking lot until sunrise. The past few days with an escalating prowler have finally driven me out of my home. I, 25 female, live alone and on the ground floor of some cute condos with lovely neighbors. I work nights, but with the pandemic, work has been scarce. Naturally, I'm used to staying up late. 4 nights ago at 2:30 a.m., I was watching TV in the living room and my dog started growling out the window. She only does this when someone or something, it's usually a cat or raccoon, is on my patio. I assumed it was an animal outside until I heard what sounded like somebody trying to open my door. I sat still and listened for more noise because I just couldn't believe that was happening. I called my mom because I'm feeling weirded out and then peek out through my blinds. All closed, by the way, to see the gate to my patio is wide open. I know I shut it and the wind doesn't ever blow it open. I'm still on the phone with my mom and I get the genius idea to go show whoever it is that I'm not scared and go latch my gate while making my presence known. I go outside and there is a man on the walkway near my patio entrance. He was walking away until he heard my door open. He fully turns around to face me and stops staring. Average looking white dude. Hoodie up, hands in pockets, no bag. Strange, as I first assumed it was just a patio thief. When he turns around and looked at me, I got a chill. Why would this thief show me his face and make a point of fully turning to face me and stare? I'm shocked and begin walking backwards towards my door to the inside. He turns back around and keeps walking away. He takes 3 steps, then fully turns around again and stops to stare at me. I went inside and stayed on the phone for a couple of hours until I finally fell asleep. I called the non-emergency police and they made a note. After that first weird encounter, I put a long and low to the ground flower pot against my patio gate so it would at least make noise if somebody opened it. A couple of nights passed and I didn't notice anyone creeping about until last night. At about 1 a.m., I heard a crashing and falling noise. Again, I call my mom for assurance and look around the house to see if anything fell. I think it must be nothing, get off the phone. I suddenly remember my DIY flower pot alarm and peek through the blinds to see yet again my gate is open and the flower pot is knocked over. He came back. I called non-emergency police again. This time they came and did a patrol of the neighborhood. Didn't catch him. Fast forward to tonight's incident. Needless to say, I'm thoroughly creeped out. I find a deal on some security cameras with motion detecting capabilities. Got to Best Buy just before closing and snagged the last pair in stock. I set those bad boys up and felt pretty safe. 1 a.m. again, I'm running a bath and on the phone with my boyfriend and get a motion detected alert for my security cameras. I assume it's just a cat because I didn't hear the gate crash. I reset my flower pot system after it was knocked over the previous night. To my horror, I see a man tiptoeing from the side of my patio towards my door, hoodie up, hands in pockets. He knew not to use the gate because it made noise last night. It was him. He wiggles my door handle. I'm absolutely terrified he is right there. He's back again. I throw on a long coat and run into the lobby barefoot and call 911. My boyfriend got here before the police and was running through the back with a baseball bat looking for this creep. Unfortunately for me and lucky for him, he didn't find him. Police didn't find him either. So here I am, sitting in a McDonald's parking lot at 7 a.m., scared to go home. It's all just too creepy and I know to trust my gut. Why would he turn around and stare the first time? Why would he come back after he knew I saw him? And why is he so determined to be here? He hopped the fence to avoid the loud noise of the gate/flower pot. What scares me most is how persistent and undeterred he seems by any of it. What will stop him? What is the end game for him? Nothing is missing from my patio. Frankly, there's nothing to steal. He never had a backpack or bag, just hands in his pockets. I have him trying the door tonight on video. I just don't know how to attach it here. Any advice? Anyone know the psychology of guys like this? What can I do? I'm also staying at a friend's house for a few days and will be monitoring the cameras closely. This happened in 2007 when I was 19. It was summer break and I didn't have to work, so I used my day off to go to a park, climb a tree and read a book. Nobody else was in the park that day. Mine was the only car in the parking lot. It was a beautiful day, so I remember being a little bit surprised at that, but it was also mid-morning on a weekday, so I figured that was why I had the place to myself. I'd been there about an hour when I heard a car pull in. This park is on the top of a steep hill overlooking a valley, and the entrance is kind of strange. You can't exit where you entered. Once you enter the park, you are immediately in the sole parking lot. There is an exit on the far end of the parking lot that circles the entire park and dumps you out on the main road. From where I was sitting and from most angles, the parking lot curves, and a majority of it, including the exit, is hidden around a bend and a bunch of trees. You can only see a small portion of the lot. I heard someone enter, but I didn't look up in time to see the car before it disappeared around the bend. A moment later, movement caught my eye. A man walked into the park. He was older but not elderly, late 50s, early 60s. I did the smile, nod, wave thing you do with strangers. He ignored me, which is usually no problem. After all, nobody owes me their time. I was a little bit weirded out, however, because although he didn't acknowledge me, he walked right toward me. I thought maybe he needed directions. Maybe he's actually heading past me to go look at the view of the valley, which you cannot see it all from the tree. But no, without saying a word or looking at me in the eye, he walked to the tree and sat down directly beneath me. I know it sounds silly, I'm sure, but there was something about his presence that really got to me. It wasn't even the silence. I can sit in silence, no problem. I actually prefer it. It was just him. He was completely motionless, like no coughing or fidgeting, nothing. He stared at the small section of the parking lot and the porta potties. He could have sat anywhere in the entire empty park, but chose to sit directly beneath the girl he was ignoring. So he could sit and silently stare at the parking lot. Why come to a beautiful park with great views and nature trails if you're going to look at the parking lot? I don't know why, but my intuition had me on high alert. I told myself that I wasn't getting down until he left. If he tried to come up after me, I thought I would win. I could stomp on his hands, push him, or whatever. But if I came down, I was vulnerable. He could grab my legs. It was too high to jump down without risking injury. Best to stay put. Thing was, I kind of expected him to move after a while. But nope. He sat beneath me for more than a half hour without so much as fidgeting. The whole time I kept saying to myself, hey, you're just being paranoid. He's just an older dude at a park. Maybe he really likes this tree. But I still didn't get down. At that point though, I was also kind of over being stuck in the tree, so I decided to smoke him out. I texted a friend and said there was a strange man near me and asked if she would give me a call. I figured if he's just a benign old man looking for some peace and quiet, then my being loud will encourage him to seek it in literally any other section of this very large empty park. If he's trying to murder me, maybe he'll realize I have a cell phone, because not everyone did back in 2007, and hopefully leave me alone. At the very least, I thought that if I waited long enough, somebody else might come into the park and see me. My friend called and asked me if I was okay, and I tried to seem nonchalant and breezy. She just kept checking in throughout the call. Is he still there? How about now? He didn't move a muscle, didn't acknowledge that I was being pretty rude, just kept staring out at the parking lot. I was still telling myself that I was being paranoid. My friend thankfully had the time to stay on the phone with me. We talked for about 40 minutes and then he just stood up and left. I watched him disappear around the bend in the parking lot. As soon as he was out of earshot, I told my friend he had left and we left in my paranoia. Yeah, she teased. Some creepy old man in the park scared you by sitting. I felt so silly acting like I had. At that point, our fake conversation had turned into a real one though, so we stayed on the phone. I hadn't seen her in a couple of months since college had let out for the summer, so we had a lot to catch up on. Outside of the awkwardly fake small talk we'd made for the past 40 minutes. I was in that tree for another 30 minutes and stayed on the line as I hopped down. I gathered up my stuff and walked to the parking lot. I turned the bend and stopped. No one else had come into the park, but my car wasn't alone. Parked opposite, it was a black, windowless 16-passenger van, and in the driver's seat, the older man. I felt frozen. I said to my friend, "He's been waiting in the parking lot this whole time." And she yelled, "So what are you waiting for? Get in your car." That got me moving. I ran to my car as fast as I could, locked my doors, and watched him in my rearview mirror. I started my car and he started his van. I reversed out of my spot, he reversed out of his. I went toward the exit, so did he. I drove like crazy out of that one-lane road out of the park, despite the speed limit being 15 because of all the wildlife, and I'm still thankful I didn't hit a deer or an animal or someone. He kept up, but I lost him on a bend and made it to the main road. I watched my mirrors the whole way home in case he was still following me. I looked over my shoulder for weeks afterwards, worried that he had my license plate number. Basically, I think I got away from my would-be kidnapper by being patient and annoying. Always trust your intuition. Once, when I was about 13 or 14, I got home from school and was home alone. I was kind of an anxious kid, and this was before cell phones were common. About 2002, I think. I called my mom at work a lot. This involved calling the security desk, and they would come get her off the factory floor. And she told me that I couldn't call her at work anymore because she could get in trouble. Previously, I would call about things like, "When are you coming home?" and just to make up stuff to talk about because I was bored or lonely, so I get it. Recently, my mom had purchased on credit a big flat screen TV and stand from Best Buy. And we had spent tons of time treating our living room like a movie theater. We had over 200 VHS tapes. We lived with my grandma while I was growing up, in a basement apartment. It was a walkout and had a full kitchen and bathroom, while grandma lived upstairs. I came home on the bus and noticed that my grandma had left the garage door open. She was a little forgetful sometimes, so it was something she did from time to time. I went straight to the basement from my garage and into my room. I remember looking around like, dang, I thought I just cleaned up in here, and it's a mess already. I was a bit of a slob as a kid when it came to my room though, so I didn't think much of it. I was only in there for a minute or so before deciding to go watch some TV. I got to the living room and it was gone. Now, I'm not the brightest crayon in the box when it comes to real life stuff at this age, so I'm mostly just confused. I honestly believe at this point that the TV is broken and my mom sent it to Best Buy or something to be repaired. I go upstairs to my grandma's house to use the phone. Our phone line downstairs we only used for internet at the time. I called my mom at work, knowing she's going to be a bit mad, and she is. It went a little bit like this after they brought her to the phone. What? Sorry to call, I was just wondering. Where's the TV? What are you talking about? It's downstairs where it always is. No, it's gone. Is it in the shop? That's when she got serious. Are you home alone? Is Grandma there? No, she's gone. She left the garage door open when she left. That's not good. Go lock yourself in the bathroom. I'm coming home. At this point, I hear footsteps running loudly up our basement stairs. The access to the basement was through the garage, the same as the access to the upstairs. I scream and drop the phone, corded wall phone, running to the back of the house where the bathroom is, slamming the door, locking it, and opening the bathroom vanity drawers since the door opened inward and it wouldn't open with the drawers out. My mom called the police and rushed over. Our house at the time was set up in such a way that we shared an entrance with the parking lot, so I'm assuming whoever was robbing us was parked over there, which is why I didn't notice any cars and they got away so fast. My room was trashed. My mom's room was trashed, and the TV and fishbowl full of change were gone. The scariest part to me was not just that I was downstairs alone with the person, but that I was in the same room. The basement was a one-bedroom with a huge living room. My mom had cut the living room in half with a big entertainment center, which the TV was in front of, but she had no door, only a wide opening to one side, so while I was checking out the TV, somebody was on the other side of the entertainment center, going through my mom's underwear drawer. How do I know? Because they stole all of her underwear too, except for one pair that was on the stairs when the cops got there, and it wasn't there when I went downstairs when I got home. Actually, my mom always said she thought it was a woman who robbed us, because she assumed that she took all of her underwear and swimsuits, same drawer to wear. I don't agree, although she could have been protecting her own feelings or mine at the time. Cops never found our stuff, and it took 10 years before my mom got a big TV like that again.